Welcome to Business Miles, the show where I explore the journeys behind remarkable leaders and the companies they've built. I'm your host, Anish Khadiya, co-founder and chief business officer at Itilite. Today, I'm joined by one of the most recognized voices in the AEC industry, Mark Zweig. Mark is the founder of Zweig Group, a lifelong entrepreneur and someone who spent decades right at the center of business transformation. Mark has built and scaled multiple companies, advised hundreds of CEOs, and shaped how AEC firms think about growth and leadership. His impact on AEC space is hard to miss. Mark, it's a real pleasure to have you with me here today. Welcome to Business Miles.
Thanks. Great to be here with you, Anish. Glad that we got acquainted and you're having me on your show. Honored.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure. And let's start right at the beginning of your career, Mark. You've had an incredible journey where you started from a $200 office, 1988, to now that you've built multiple Inc. 500 companies. What did hustle really mean back then in the AEC industry? And what are some of the aspects of building AEC companies that haven't changed at all?
I mean, hustle to me is just back then or now is the same thing. It's doing whatever you got to do to take care of your clients and your business and not saying, I want to pursue work-life balance. This is when I work and this is when I live. The two are really integral. They have to be one and the same. And so you do whatever you got to do when you got to do it is the answer, because that's your job. That's how you're going to distinguish yourself from the other guy, I think, is by being unbelievably responsive and by always coming through when you need to and making excuses.
That's great to hear. And I know many people around me often struggle with this. They think the nature of business or the nature of work has changed. They think today, and I was speaking to someone a couple of hours before where we were talking about hard work and smart work.
Yeah.
A lot of people today think smart work's the way to go. And I've for very long believed the road to smart work goes through hard work. And I think that's essentially what you are talking about as well, right?
That is it. Yes.
How can you outwork everyone else around you?
Yeah. I mean, that's essential. And, along with that, I think if you really want to build a business, you can't extract everything from the business. You've got to be willing to, I think a lot of people start a small business, small AE firm, if you just want to talk about that. And they basically live on everything that the business makes and they don't reinvest in the business. And it's just not the way to do it. If you really want to grow your business and make it into something other than just a way to make a living, and I'm sure you know this, you can't take everything out of it. You got to put
Yeah.
money back in. If it makes $8,000 a month, maybe you need to live on 3 and put 5 back in. That's how, that money has to be used to buy equipment, hire people, spend money on marketing, all the other stuff, invest in systems. And that's another place I think that, many people who start these companies, they almost fail right out of the box because they don't understand what it really takes to grow a business that's going to have a life beyond you.
And that brings me to my next question, which is about a growing AEC firm. As the company grows, what are the top priorities that need to change for the company's CEO or leaders? And also, what is the one habit promoters or founders hold on to for too long that actually slows them down?
I'll take that last one first if I can. And that habit is simply feeling like they have to do everything themselves and every decision has to run through them. I mean, that's called, single person management. And that's going to kill the company at some level. It is essential early on because, you do know how to do everything better than everybody else, probably in your one person business that you created. But you've got to build trust in your people, and you cannot micromanage. If you do that, you will be dead. So I think that's the bad habit people tend to hold on to. But the priorities do change over time. This is another one of the sort of conventional wisdom cliches I see constantly these days out there. If you're in places like LinkedIn, where you and I are, it's work on your business, not in your business. And, everybody is promoting this idea that, you shouldn't be doing the work of the business. You should simply be working on the strategy and how to grow the company, yada, yada, yada. I don't buy that one either. I think it's a very slow process and there's a big continuum out there. And people who decide they want to work on the business too soon and not in the business and divorce themselves from the business, meaning they're not managing clients, they're not selling, they're not doing the actual work of the business. They go off course. I mean, it's just inevitable. You can't do that too soon. Yes, you do need to spend time on those kinds of initiatives. No question about it if you want to grow. But is that 20% of your time? Is that 10% of your time? Is that you work 100% on the work of the business during the regular hours, and then in your extra time, you do the other stuff? I think those are all questions people need to answer. Yeah, you've got to do the other stuff, but you can't get out of the work and the clients too soon. I see a lot of people try to do that, and that doesn't work either.
So interesting. My analogy for what you just said is if you become an investor in your company too soon, then your company is not going to grow.
I like that. I really like that. Yeah. You can't just think like an investor, is your point.
Yeah. And you don't want to operate like an investor. Look at dashboards and I would look at, I do reviews and then I'll spend 80% of my time trying to vision out where the company is growing. What you are saying is, don't give up on being an operator too soon.
Exactly. That's it.
Got it. So this is one thing you mentioned which one shouldn't change or one that a leader or a promoter should change slowly. What are the other things that maybe a leader needs to change as the company grows?
Well, I mean, I think you've got to realize that you set the example for everyone. And so your work habits, when you work, how you treat other people, all those things you've got to be a lot more deliberate. You've got to really think about those things. More intentional as the word is,
Yeah.
because they impact everybody else. Your example is so important. It sets the tone for the whole business. You're establishing a culture. You want the culture to be a positive culture that produces results and makes the organization successful. When you're just a little business starting out, all you really need is people who will do what you tell them to do. But that morphs along the way,
Yeah.
and it takes a different approach at some point where you've got to have smart people figuring out things that you haven't figured out and who want to be there and be part of your thing and share your vision with you. I do think that that's another failing of many of these small business owners, that they don't understand. They don't really provide enough rewards for people. They don't really provide, an environment that they would want to work in. And yet they expect other people to put in extra effort and do an outstanding job and be great at their work, but they don't really have a rewards
Yep.
system that goes along and supports that idea. They're too selfish, frankly. I mean, I could speak again. I hate to generalize, and so please, I hope the audience can forgive me, but I found architects are worse about that than engineers. They tend to be more self-centered and put themselves in the Howard Rourke role of stardom, promoted by the role model, the world's worst role model ever, the fountainhead main character.
Yeah.
And they think they're the star, and they get very selfish and they hog all the credit and all the rewards. And then they wonder why nobody good wants to work there.
Very interesting. points. And I love your philosophy about being intentional. Be intentional about the culture you set up. Be intentional about the reward and recognition system that you set up. Create an enabling environment that can attract high quality people and get them to buy into your vision.
Yeah, it's critical. I mean, that's why I'm a big advocate for things like open book management. I'm going to share the numbers. I want everybody to understand
Yeah.
exactly how the company is performing, how it makes money, how it loses money. And then I want them to share in the rewards,
Yep.
if we're successful. And eventually I may sell them some of the business. And, I want them to understand the business if that's the case and what they're getting into and know how to increase the value of the business through performance. So it's kind of a virtuous cycle. You know,
Yeah.
you can either create that or you can say, no, it's all about me. I mean, it really, and of course, there's a lot of different, again, it's a continuum. Where are you on that continuum? But I
Yeah.
think really want to take the brakes off and grow the business, then, you do have to think differently. You've got to be less selfish. You've got to be more open with the information and the rewards.
Got it. That's very, very deep and very useful. Now, one of the other things I noticed, you've always championed is if you do what everyone else is doing, then your outcomes will always be average. When you look at AEC companies and how they run their operations, for example, things like travel and overheads, what do you see is the most inefficient thing that costs them? Is travel one of these things that's run very inefficiently?
I mean, no, travel's not run efficiently in the typical company at all. I mean, the majority of people in our business who travel make all their own arrangements. And you have no idea whether they're getting the best deal or not. Are they getting are the rewards being aggregated under one account? Are they booking at the best times that make the most sense from the standpoint of their productivity? I mean, there's just so many variables out there that when you completely decentralize it like that, you have no idea of whether it's being done well or not. So obviously there's waste there. Now, I think the question in this business is how much of that waste is passed on to the client and how much of it is overhead related. I mean, I'd build a case that if that waste is passed on to the client in terms of reimbursable expenses that are then marked up, I mean, it still looks bad for you. I mean, I always think about that. Like, if I'm buying flights to go to a client in New York or whatever, I don't just go book expensive flights and go, well, they make a lot of money. They can pay for that. And I'm sure
Yeah.
people who think just like that. I always think, how can I do this the most economically way possible? But not everybody in your business is going to be like that at all. And so some of that's cost is going to be passed on to your clients. That's not going to make you look good. And so that's a problem. And then there's just all the efficiency of the time wasted
Yeah.
issue. When you have no control over what people are doing, which the typical firm doesn't, you don't know how much time they're wasting in their itineraries and how they've set things up.
I I can 100% vouch for it. We have several AEC companies that are customers, and I know a chunk of time the project engineers and project managers spend is on just sorting out hotel check-in issues. When crew travels, I know on average about an hour to a couple of hours are spent every week just navigating the hotel check-ins.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. I mean, there's just so many aspects of this. I mean, do they all fly out at the same time and that minimizes the transportation costs from the airport to the hotel? They're
Yeah.
just everybody just do their own thing and they all get their own Uber. I mean, it just goes through the entire system. I mean, I've worked in many situations where they don't even have a hotel. You could have four people going to one city and three different hotels they're staying in. It's just incredibly inefficient because they're not talking with each other.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's just so many ways that things can go wrong there, and there's waste and efficiency. And that's just, that's one area that I do see waste in. I do think, though, if I were to generalize, when you go back to your question about what firms do that everybody else does, I think there is a pervasive attitude that all overhead is bad and overhead should be minimized. And I disagree with that. There's good overhead and there's bad overhead. I mean, waste in travel, time and expense, that's waste. That doesn't
Yeah.
do anything for the business at all. Higher overhead expenses by spending more money on marketing or IT, those things may make a huge difference in
Yeah.
in the company's, ultimate performance and efficiency. So I do, I don't like the sort of philosophy that all overhead is bad overhead. Let me say that.
I 100% agree with you. And sometimes it's possible to turn a bad overhead into a good overhead as well. A case in point is travel. As you just mentioned, there's a lot of waste within travel in the AEC industry. But if done well, then you could foster deeper client relationships, offer a more competitive cost proposal to your customers as well. As is the norm, usually travel costs are passed on to customers,
Yeah.
sometimes marked up, but then again, the customer is also looking at the cost of the project.
Exactly. And I tell you, I've seen situations. I'll never forget one time that we had the woman who was doing the billing for the company comes to me and she says, "Hey," she goes, "I just want you to know," and she goes, "I don't understand this." She said, "So and so went to see a client in Cleveland or wherever it was. And yet on the expense bill here, I've got a $20 Domino's pizza delivery to their house. How is that possible?" I said, "Hell, I don't know. Let me ask the guy." So I ask him, I call him in, I ask him, he's like, "Well, I could have bought that pizza, for dinner that night when I was coming back at the airport, but instead I decided to wait until I got home and then I ordered it." I'm like, "Are you kidding me? If we sent this to the client and they audited that bill and they saw that you spent that $20 on a pizza at your house at 10 o'clock at night, they are going to think we're absolute criminals.
Yeah.
You will blow the entire client relationship." So, that I guess that's another thing. I mean, people need to think about if somebody's out there, if they have travel policies that no one enforces and no one ever looks at and audits these bills, which I think in most companies they don't, in my experience, they just pass them on. I mean, they run the risk of seriously alienating a client if there's ridiculous waste that's apparent. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And you make a very important point. I think too many AEC companies, even today, treat travel and reimbursements as, operationally instead of thinking about it strategically. And I think that needs to change today, or
Yeah.
maybe even as of yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, and don't, and there's also plenty of non-billable travel in the bigger companies.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other thing. That's just pure cost for them.
Yeah. And that brings down the margins as well,
Yep.
ultimately reducing shareholder value. Um, this brings me to another thing that I've learned from you, which is build cash like your life depends on it. In a boom cycle, when everyone's spending freely, what's the one discipline most companies avoid that comes back, you know, uh,
What's the one discipline?
yeah? Or what's the one thing that companies lose discipline on?
I mean, there's a variety of things they do. They oftentimes end up with too much space because they're sitting there planning on this growth. I see it all the time in bigger companies where they're opening new offices. It's like, well, we can get this space. We've only got 3 people there, but we're going to get the space for 15 because we plan on growing to 15. That's a big waste. I see a lot of that. They should get a small space. They should have a place that's got adjacent space they can rent or know where else they're going to go in the building if they need more space. They make these commitments for long-term commitments based on something that's not happened yet. So that's a problem. I think, other ways, it's just the partners just tend to start wasting more money. They go out to nicer restaurants, they go out more often, they buy more expensive stuff when they do. They start dragging other people along that maybe shouldn't be there. So there's a certain amount of waste that builds up there. I'm just trying to think. I mean, the other thing I think is a really huge waste that companies do is too many meetings with too many people involved. And that's an absolute killer on, I mean, time is all we're selling. They can say
Yeah.
we sell expertise, whatever you want, but that's not the truth of the matter is plenty of what we do is sell time. All right.
Yeah.
And so the more time we take to do stuff like be in non-productive meetings, the more of our capacity we waste. And that tends to grow as the business grows and becomes more bureaucratic. You know, it,
Absolutely. It leads to institutional overthink.
yeah, yep. That's a
And then
good way to phrase it.
when
I
you
like
need to
that.
be nimble, it hurts you because
Yep.
now you're doing 6 meetings to address an issue which probably required just a meeting.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe it didn't even take a meeting. Maybe you should have just sent an email out and gotten people's reaction or whatever. Yeah, there's that. That is a institutional, what did you call it?
Overthink.
Institutional overthink. I've got to remember that one, Anish. That's such a good term. I've seen these sort of typical evolution of a company and the kinds of people they hire, and they start out with the entrepreneur and then they get the hunters who the big game hunters that bring in the work, and then the next thing they do is they hire professional managers, and then those morph into bureaucrats, and then it's all downhill after that.
Yeah. Yeah. Been there.
Typical evolution.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, building on that point, another important thing is data. In today's world, data is, all pervasive. It's everywhere. I know you said that data is great, but it is not a substitute for thinking.
Yes.
Do you think leaders today are relying too much on data and losing their instinct for the business?
Yeah, I think some are. Yeah, I think that particularly if you look at advanced business education, let's say MBAs, of which I have one myself, okay, and I work in a,
I do
you
too.
know, you do too. And I work in a university college, a significant college of business. It
Yeah.
has a very highly rated MBA program. I'm on the board of my alma mater, which changed its name from the College of Business and Administration to the College of Business and Analytics in response to this data-driven, we make data-driven decisions. Okay, everybody says that. I think it can go too far. I mean, I absolutely do think it goes too far. And some people feel they can't make any decision unless they've got numbers to justify it. And some things you'll never have the numbers to justify. I'll go back to marketing and branding. I can't quantify necessarily what any expense that I make in branding brings to the company. But I've got faith that if I do that long enough and I build up a lot of name recognition, it's going to be easier whenever we go make a proposal to somebody because they're more likely to have heard of us and the risk is lower then for them to make the decision to hire us. I mean, not everything can you justify with numbers. Now, if I did that for 10 years, I could show you why it's better. But I
Yeah.
think the time horizon, and then I see my other misuse of data example in this business is it's this one. We don't make any money doing X, therefore we should no longer do that. Okay. Now, that could be a small project. So we don't make money on jobs that are less than $10,000, therefore we no longer do them. So we say that to a client at some point and they go, great. So they go get somebody else and now they give them all their work. Okay.
Yeah.
Because they were willing to do the small job. but the data says we don't make any money on those. Your data sucks. Let's look at the client relationship in total. Okay. You're looking at the wrong thing. Or the other one. The other one that gets me is we don't make any money in this office, or we don't make any money in this discipline or this department, so let's can it. Okay, so we do that. Nobody thinks about, I could have a department that pays $400,000 a year in corporate overhead and it loses $100,000. Okay.
Yeah.
So therefore, my quant jocks go, get out of this. We don't make any money on that. We lost 100,000. But they don't think about who pays the 400,000 in overhead. We're 300,000 back. We're
Yeah.
behind. Okay, now we're not ahead 100 when we kill it. They're not looking at the right numbers necessarily.
That's a great point. I have seen the data side of this equation several times. One of the things that always seemed stark to me is how people have started to think of data as logic. You want to be logical about how you decide, how you take business decisions,
Right.
but just substituting logic with data actually does hurt, as you pointed out.
Yep. And you
Now,
can't ignore your intuition either. I mean, you just can't ignore the human computer takes into account lots of things that no equation is going to necessarily
yeah,
consider,
yeah.
you know?
The empiricals, learnings that have happened across decades, even today's AI tools, are still trying to figure out ways to contextualize that.
Yes.
And that's hard, right? Despite their infinite memory.
Yes.
I'm going to move on to another topic where you have deep expertise. You see within the AEC industry a messy operation, where costs are not tracked well or expenses are not disciplined. How much does that affect how you value a company or its leadership?
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, it is a factor. I mean, there are many factors. It certainly is one. I mean, because you're going to have a cultural problem to overcome, probably. And you've got to make investments in systems that will correct the problem. So it's part of it's kind of a two-phase issue there in my mind. We're going to have to spend money on this company to get this stuff straightened out, and we're going to have a cultural problem because they're not as disciplined as we are here.
Yeah.
And that may be the harder one to overcome. It takes a long time. It's very difficult to do when bad habits are built up.
Yeah. Interestingly, my grandmother always used to say, bad habits are the easiest to pick up and the hardest to kick.
Yeah, your grandma, it's good logic from grandma.
Yeah. All right. So this brings me to our final question, Mark, which is, AI is now everywhere. Within the AEC industry, if AI starts taking over more of the technical work, then what would a great AEC firm actually sell in the future? Will it still be hours and expertise or something very different?
It's all about solving problems. I mean, I don't know what else to say. Everything we do in business and do for our clients is somehow solving a problem for them. Or we could say helping them capitalize on an opportunity. But more often than not, it's solving a problem. Is AI going to be able to do all that? I don't know. It's a tool. It's like anything else. To me, it's kind of like saying that I know how to use desktop publishing software. Therefore, I don't need graphic designers any longer. Okay. Well, maybe it just because you have the tool and it can do virtually anything doesn't mean that it will do the right thing. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean I don't need the designer to guide that to come up with the really good, design in the end. So you could say the same, I guess we all could have said that when CAD came out. I mean, I was in this business when we did everything manually. That's the
Yeah.
way it was when I started. I remember we got Intergraph CAD in 1983 at the company I worked at. And, people are, you could sit there and go, well, gosh, why are we using CAD? We can't charge the hours that we used to charge to a job. We pay for the CAD and then we lose money because we have less hours to bill the client. I mean, that was like a really big problem at one point. I mean, it's almost laughable today, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
absolutely. And that was the exact example that popped in my mind. We've gone from paper drawings to CAD drawings, 2-dimensional to 3-dimensional to 4-dimensional. Ultimately, it's about delivering design in the most efficient way
yeah, and
and
we,
in the way it is used best.
right. You're not, I mean, it may require us to change some of our contracts and how we bill our clients.
Yeah,
Okay. As we get, it's going to require more fixed cost contracts and things like that. I mean, obviously, but I think it's just a tool. I don't think it's any replacement for thinking. I've tried. Now, I'm not going to claim I'm any expert. Okay, I've designed a lot of houses. I am not an architect by training. I had my own design build firm, construction
yeah,
development company. I had degreed but not registered architects that worked there, or architect in some
yeah.
cases, that did what I told them to do. Okay. They could draw it, they could make the plan. But I've been trying to use AI lately on some things on a project that I'm doing for ourselves. And it's just not that good yet. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It's amazing. You can come up with the world's greatest queries and learn everything you can about how to query some of these things. And I've probably worked with a half a dozen programs in the last maybe 4 to 6 weeks, and they
Right.
all have limitations. That's all I can say. They just do. You can't do everything yet with AI. It takes thinking. I mean, it just does on a certain level. I just don't think you're going to replace the human element. I hope so, not, at least, not for a while. Let me say that. By the time they do, you and I will probably be gone. Okay.
Yeah, well, maybe that happens in due course. But I think I love where you're going. I think for our audience, across most of our questions, Mark's one point is you can't stop using your head. You have to keep thinking about your business and the way it evolves, evolve with it. Don't, however, get too enamored or put off with changes around you. AI is one of the several changes that has happened in AEC across decades. But AEC is still about building great structures, building great designs that enable those great structures. So I think that is what Mark is getting at.
You know, I think um, I think the other thing if you really look at some of the most successful companies that I've worked with over the last 40 plus years, they don't put themselves in a box in terms of the services that they'll provide. You know, I think if you think about yourself as a problem solver for your clients, instead of we're architects, we're mechanical engineers, we're mechanical contractors, whatever. Okay. Stop defining your business that way. Then it opens up the range of possible services or offerings that you can give to the client that will help you adapt over time. I mean, I know, one architecture firm, half of what they do is branding related. They didn't start out like that. They were just architects.
Yeah.
Half of their revenue is branding related. I know engineering firm that's got a significant amount of its money coming from software now. They weren't in that business, but they needed it in order to really be good at what they did. So, I mean, I just think sort of stop putting your business in this box of we do this one thing and just start thinking of yourself more as a problem solver, and you will naturally adapt over time.
Well, Mark, I'll end on that note. A very profound point. Don't box yourself into a structure.
Mhm.
Be nimble and flexible about it. Folks, during this conversation, I have heard several golden nuggets from Mark that will stay with me for very long. So, Mark, thank you for being such a wonderful guest on my show today. I personally benefited from it, and I'm sure many in our audience will as well. We are going to put out many of your golden nuggets on YouTube, both in form of a podcast and also in form of shorts. So, dear audience, please do catch up on Mark's wisdom on YouTube. If you have some thoughts, write back to me or to Mark, and we'd always appreciate your feedback.
Been great being here with you, Anish. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Dear audience, have a good day.